He worked in silence. Always silence. The surgeon's name is lost to time. Some say he was Persian. Others say Greek. But what remains is the legend. He studied medicine the old way. By watching. By listening. By touching what others feared. In his small stone room, there were no assistants. No applause. Just instruments. And bodies. He kept a journal, they say, filled with diagrams, veins, nerves, questions. Not questions of how, but why. Why does a man cry before death? Why does a woman whisper to gods as her breath fades? Is there something leaving the body? He wanted to know, and so he began to watch, not just the dying, but the moment after. He became obsessed with a moment, not the moment of life, not the moment of death, but the moment between, when the chest rises one last time, and then stills, when the eyes stop seeing, but remain open. That space, that breath, became everything to him. He believed the soul was not a myth, not a metaphor, but a real thing, a presence, a shape. And if it was real, it must leave a trace. So he waited for the moment when the body stilled and the air around it shifted. He said he felt something leave, a warmth, a lightness, but it was not enough. He needed more than feelings. He needed proof. He sharpened his blade, not with anger, not with haste, but with purpose. The soul, he believed, must have a home, and if he could open the body at just the right moment, he could see it leave. So he prepared. A dying patient, a silent room, a single candle burning low. He whispered an apology, then placed his hand over the heart, waiting for the beat to fade. And as the last breath escaped, he cut, first through the chest, then the skull. He opened the body, like a door to a mystery, looking for something that could not be weighed, or named, or stitched shut. He searched with trembling fingers, but found only blood and silence. He was not discouraged. Blood did not frighten him. He had seen it too many times. But what he had not seen, what he needed to see, was the truth inside it. Perhaps the soul wasn't in the heart. Perhaps it lived in the brain, or behind the eyes, or in the lungs. Rising with every breath, he began to cut deeper. He examined nerves, vessels, marrow. He wrote of colors. The soul may shine like silver. He wrote of sounds. I heard a whisper from the ribs. Others began to whisper too, that his hands had become cruel, that he no longer healed. He hunted, but to him it was still medicine, not of the body, but of the unknown. He wasn't trying to harm. He was trying to see what no man had seen before, even if it meant losing himself along the way. He was no longer alone. Word had spread. A healer who cut too deep, a scholar who asked the wrong questions. Priests began to watch him. Other physicians turned away. He noticed the glances, the silence when he entered the hall. But he did not stop. He recorded everything. The soul leaves through the eyes. He wrote, I have seen the pupil widen, as though reaching outward. He sketched faces at the moment of death, not for beauty, not for art, but for clues. Each wrinkle, each twitch, a map to the mystery. But to those watching, it looked like madness. To them, he wasn't seeking truth. He was desecrating the dead. And one day, a student who once praised him refused to enter his room. You're not searching for the soul, the student whispered. You're destroying it. It began with a knock, not loud, not rushed, just certain. When he opened the door, they did not shout. They did not accuse. They simply walked in and took everything. His blades, his scrolls, the diagrams drawn in sleepless nights. Gone. A priest watched from the corner. No emotion, just control. The soul is not for science. One of them said, and your hands will no longer touch the dead. He said nothing, just stared at the empty table, where so many truths had almost been revealed. He did not cry. He did not beg. But when they left, he sat in the silence and realized something colder than steel, that no matter how sharp his blade, truth could still be taken from him by fear. The room remained, the walls, the table, the stains on the floor, but without his tools, there was only silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses on your chest, the kind that feels like being buried, while still breathing. He still traced shapes in the air, mapping organs he could no longer touch. His fingers moved like memory, eyes closed, seeing what no one else dared to look for. He began to write without ink. He whispered his findings to no one. The soul recoils from pain. It trembles when the heart stops. It lingers, just beyond the lungs. They called him mad. But in truth, he had simply gone quiet. Because when they took his instruments, they did not take the question. And it still echoed, in every breath he took. Where does the soul live? And why must it hide from us? He knew he could not operate again. Not with blades. Not with bodies. But there was one subject left. Himself. He began fasting. Meditating. Slowing his breath. To feel the space between thoughts. He stared at his reflection for hours, watching his eyes blink, wondering if the soul could be seen, escaping in tiny moments. He wrote, "If I become the patient, perhaps I will meet the soul on its path." Friends had stopped visiting. The whispers had grown. But he didn't mind, because he was closer now, closer than ever. One night, he lit a single candle, placed a mirror before him, and began to speak to the soul, as if it were listening. "If you are in here," he said, "show me, before I vanish too." But the mirror stayed silent, and the candle kept flickering. He no longer touched flesh, but he kept dissecting. Not with knives, with memory, with questions, with dreams. At night, he saw the faces of those he'd studied, eyes that opened wide before death, mouths that whispered last words no one could hear. He replayed each scene in his mind, pausing moments, slowing time, cutting not into bodies, but into silence itself. He became convinced the soul was a ghost, not one that haunted rooms, but one that haunted thought, a thing not seen by light, but felt in the dark. He wrote a final line in the margin of a page. "The soul cannot be caught, only chased." And then, he stopped writing. Years passed, decades. The surgeon vanished. His name faded from memory, but his notes remained, hidden beneath loose stone, stuffed behind shelves, folded inside forgotten scrolls. Until one day, a young scholar, curious, quiet, uncovered a box covered in dust. Inside, sketches of organs, diagrams of eyes, and words that felt more like whispers than writing. "The soul trembles near the lungs. Look in the pupil, not the brain. Pain is the shadow it leaves behind." The scholar did not laugh. He did not dismiss it. He copied it. He preserved it. And in doing so, he gave the surgeon's madness a second life, not as medicine, not as science, but as a question that would never fully die. The scholar brought the notes to the temple. He believed knowledge, even strange, deserved a place among the scrolls. But the priest refused. "These are not teachings," they said. "They are wounds in paper." The surgeon's words were dangerous, not because they were wrong, but because they made people wonder. And questions, in the wrong hands, were sparks. So they lit a fire. A small one, just enough to burn the pages. But the scholar had copied them, had buried duplicates, had whispered lines to others who would not forget. The fire they started did not consume the question. It fed it. And from the ashes of fear, something else began to grow. Curiosity, defiance, the hunger to know what lies inside us. Even if it hurts, they searched everywhere, not just in flesh, but in fire, in dreams, in silence. Generations passed. Some looked to science, others looked to faith, but all asked the same thing. Where does it go when we go? Some said the soul lived in the heart. Others said it was in the blood, in the breath, in the voice. But none could say for sure. And so the surgeon's question lived on, not because it was answered, but because it refused to die. In laboratories, in poetry, in last words spoken into the dark, it echoed, not as a scream, but as a whisper, that something might still be hiding inside us, watching, waiting, listening. One scholar lit a candle, just as the surgeon once had. He sat before a mirror and watched himself breathe, noticing the pause between the two, that moment of stillness, fragile, brief, like the space between a heartbeat. "Perhaps," he whispered, "the soul is not inside the body. Perhaps the soul is what fills the silence around it." He leaned closer to the mirror, not to see his eyes, but to see what looked back. When he stopped pretending to be alive, that night he didn't write. He simply breathed. And in that breath, he felt something ancient, not proof, not evidence, but presence. The same presence the surgeon had once chased, with trembling hands. A ghost made of thought, a light no blade could ever reach. They tried, for centuries, weighed the body before and after death, watched brainwaves fade, tracked pulses, scan the chest for light. But the soul, if it is real, does not leave fingerprints. It does not bleed. It does not decay. It leaves nothing. And yet it leaves everything. The surgeon had asked a question. The world keeps asking, what are we really, when the body is no longer here? Some say we are memory. Some say we are spark. Some say we are nothing at all. But even now, in rooms across the world, people still stare into the eyes of the dying, waiting, hoping, listening for something they cannot name. A breath, a whisper, a sign that something unseen has just left the room. The surgeon is gone, his name erased, his tools lost, his bones dust, but his question still lingers. It floats in the air between doctor and patient. It echoes in the pause before a last breath. It hums in the silence after the heart stops. What are we? What leaves when we leave? Is there something that remains? Even when the blood cools and the skin turns pale? The blade could not find it. The books could not bind it. But the question remains, because it lives not in the body, but in the longing to understand, the longing to believe that we are more than meat and memory, that something in us shines, flickers, whispers, and waits to be seen. The soul perhaps is not a thing to find, but a question to carry, until our final breath.